Chris Colbert versus King Tug Nyambayar. This is the review of that fight. Chris Colbert looked good, man. Superb performance. A lot to like with this guy. And we'll talk about the advantages, the great things that he does before we get into two glaring disadvantages that he has moving forward throughout his career. But as of right now, a guy that a lot of people didn't know going into last week, that a lot of people got to know, being that he was in front of the camera on Fight Hype, giving great interviews about Deontay Wilder, just showing his gift of gab. And it's good that a lot of people have exposure to this guy now because he has a lot of good attributes, a lot of things in the lower weight classes that people should see. Talented guy, gift of gab, fun fighter to watch at times. So a lot going for Chris Colbert. As far as this fight coming in, I picked it 8-4, 9-3, wide decision for Chris Colbert going in. King Tug, a tough fighter on a week and a half late notice opponent, filling in for Gamboa. This was a step up from Gamboa, 39 years old. So King Tug, a tough fighter, even though he's coming up in a weight class. Chris Colbert showed a lot of good things in this fight. He had some issues early in the fight with King Tug. He made those adjustments and then took over this fight going away. The great thing about Colbert is the jab. Jab, one of the best jabs in the game. He reminds me a lot of Malignaggi, a guy with not much power, but a great jab to make up for that. Can walk you down at times because his toughness is underrated. Can use lateral movement, can go fight off of his back foot. The gift of gab, a lot of similarities with Malignaggi, and we'll talk more about that in a minute because I want to talk about one of his glaring disadvantages going forward. But as far as this fight, I expected King Tug to give Colbert a little more trouble in this fight than he did. A guy on short notice, tough style, moving up a weight class. Chris Colbert's a guy who right now is, depending on where you look at it, was somewhere between 7 and 10 in the division. I'd like to see where he is in the division in the rankings right now. I assume he's nipping the heels at the top 5 after this performance, somewhere between 5 and 7. Probably around 6 is where he'd probably be at most of the rankings at 130. Great performance. King Tug was a guy somewhere between 7 and 10 at 126. So a tough step up in weight on short notice, but a guy who has a tough style and does not go away. And Colbert dealt with that brilliantly because he's a guy who can show you many different looks. If plan E doesn't go according to plan, he can give you plan B, plan C, plan D. The jab can keep opponents at bay. If he gets in trouble, the opponent gets on the inside, he can use lateral movement, can fight off the back foot, check hook, and it can walk you down as well if he needs to do that. Tough fighter. He's a tough fighter. And a fun fighter to watch for a guy who is a defensive, a guy who is a great defensive fighter. So a lot going for Chris Colbert. Let's talk about the two disadvantages he has going forward though. Number one, the lack of power, 6 knockouts in 16 fights. That could either be a lack of power or it could be a guy who's been in there tough early in his career. 5 or 6 years in, he's been in there with some tougher touches, but some guys with tough chins, but he has a clear lack of power. The difference with him and Malignaggi is he can use his angles better and he hits you with shots that you don't see coming. So therefore, and he has a much better right hand than Malignaggi had, much better. So he can at least keep you at bay and give you respectable power. Although it's not knockout power, it's respectable power, so he can keep his opponents at bay. So that's one difference from Malignaggi. But the similarities, I worry about if he steps up in class like Malignaggi did with Hatton and Khan and fell short. Will he be able to compete with those elite level guys, an Oscar Valdez, a Shakur Stevenson, if he moves up to 135, a Tank Davis if that fight were to happen, or a Lomachenko? Would he be able to keep those guys at bay with a lack of power? Because those guys have special attributes as well. So that's one thing to worry about. Number two is being with PBC. PBC doesn't have a monopoly on, they don't have as many fighters in the lower weight classes that they do at, say, welterweight. Where Terrence Crawford has problems getting fights at welterweight because he's with Top Rank. He's on Top Rank Island. Chris Colbert has a similar situation going on here. He's on PBC Island at 130 because Shakur Stevenson, Oscar Valdez, Jamal Herring, those aren't guys who, with the politics of boxing, aren't accessible to him as far as fights right now. Those just aren't makeable fights because Top Rank's going to try to keep that money in-house at the top of 130, unfortunately. Although those fights are the fights I want to see right now. So hopefully those fights get made. But as far as Chris Colbert, he's kind of locked out of those top 3 guys right now because he's with PBC. So who is available to him at 130? That's the issue right now. He doesn't have too many options at 130 for a step-up fight. So he's going to have to do that thing where he stays active, which with PBC fighters, I don't know if that's going to happen. He's got to stay active. He's got to look impressive, and then he's got to force these guys to come out of house. Although that didn't work for Terrence Crawford so far at 147. So sometimes it's just the business of boxing. It's not available for you. And I worry about that for Chris Colbert. Although a guy that's in the top 10 who's possible for him is Leo Santa Cruz. So I'd love to, and he called him out. So I would love to see Chris Colbert versus Leo Santa Cruz at 130. At least that keeps those 2 guys busy and gives us a meaningful fight for Chris Colbert in the top 10 of that division. And hopefully he stays hot and stays in front of people, in front of people's eyes. That way people are looking out for Chris Colbert at 130. So fun fighter, showed a lot of good attributes in this fight. What y'all think about Chris Colbert versus King Tug? Hit me up, let me know. God bless, peace.